Ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter is Dan Boivin. Dan is the chairman of the Metropolitan Airports Commission, and Dan is going to tell us more about Jeff, so please welcome him.
Hi, Dan. Good to see you. Absolutely. No, I know. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone here, and I will keep it brief, Frank, I promise, because anybody who knows Jeff Hamiel's speeches, they can go on for a little while. And we tend to ask Jeff sometimes to shorten his presentations before the commission, but my relationship with Jeff, my friendship with Jeff goes back to 2002 when the then new mayor of Minneapolis, R.T. Ryback, who ran as a noise activist protesting at the airport against all the noise in Southwest Minneapolis, came to me and said, hey, I have an appointment on the Metropolitan Airports Board. How would you like to go on? And I said, RT, I'm not a noise activist. I love the airport. It's close by, blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm not your guy. And he says, no, I know you. I trust you. And by the way, it's such a great asset. Don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. Even though he ran as a noise activist, R.T. Ryback at the time was just very laudatory of the airport and what was being done. So I get on the board, and of course, I have Jeff Hamiel, who is already a little suspicious of me because R.T. appointed me. And so we had to sort of feel each other out, had to build a relationship over time. And I came into that board not knowing one thing about the aviation business. I was a friend of R.T. Ryback. That was my claim to fame on that board. And I had to learn, and I had to learn from Jeff, and I had to learn the organization, and I had to learn about the relationships at the time with Northwest Airlines, and then Delta and Sun Country and all the airlines and the relationships with all the service companies that are out of the airport. And I basically also had to learn about Jeff's relationships with the staff and the employees. And there were tough years out at that airport. And one of the reasons why Jeff is such a loved person out at that airport is, I mean, there were years where the industry was down, the airlines were laying off people left and right, and there were no layoffs at the airport. Jeff would have to go to the unions, would have to go to the workers and saying, I can't give you a pay increase. I can't do anything, but I'm not going to lay you off. And that went for 3 years. I remember 3 straight years where there were no increases. And Jeff was saying that we're all in this together. I'm going to stick by you, keep working hard, keep being loyal, we'll get through this. And we sure did. And as we all know, everyone in this room is touched and uses that airport. And I'm very biased, of course, but in my opinion, we have one of the best airports in the world. It is simply an asset of this state and region that is unlike any other. It is one of the largest economic engines in this, certainly in the state and upper Midwest, and between Chicago and Seattle, maybe Denver is another big economic engine. But think about all that goes on and comes through that airport. Think how it supports Medtronic. Think how it supports Coburn. It is such a vital part of our community. And what I am really proud of here today is I looked at all the past inductees of the Hall of Fame here, and I think Jeff's the first government person. Now think about this. This is the Business Hall of Fame. And here's a government person, a person who spent his life in the military and then at an organization, a public organization. We're created by the state legislature. We're like our own little city. And here's a gentleman who is being honored by the business community for what he's done in public service. And I think that's just such a recognition of what we should really be proud of and think about Jeff. And when I think about Jeff, I think about this kid from the east side of St. Paul who loved aviation, Johnson High School, right, Jeff? Went in the military, went to University of Minnesota Duluth, went in the military, and then ended up at the MAC. And when I think about him, I think of that other East Sider, Wendy Anderson, on the cover of Time magazine, holding up the fish, talking about the good life in Minnesota. And that article was about the relationship between the business community and government and why things work. And I will tell you, everybody here, that one of the reasons why this airport works, why this community works, is under the leadership of a person like Jeff Hamiel. Because he can motivate, he can push, he can cajole, he can deal with the difficult times we had. And there were many difficult times. I mean, think about the loan to Northwest Airlines. If the state and if the airport did not loan the money, which was all paid back with interest, Richard Anderson at Delta was always proud when he sent that final check to us. And I'll never forget that, but it was all paid back, and it was one of the best things they'd done. But it was very controversial at the time. We were trying to save a major Minnesota business. And it was under the leadership of Jeff that we were able to achieve those kind of things that make this airport and make this community what it is. And so I'm just honored. I am so proud of the fact that Jeff is probably the first government person in the Business Hall of Fame. So I want you to all welcome my friend Jeff Hamiel up here.
Well, I have to say, first of all, thanks to Dan Boivin for the last 14 or 15 years that we've worked together. He came to the board as a commissioner. He did work for R.T. Ryback, and I was nervous and a little bit worried about what he would do on the board. But he was actually a great commissioner for many years, and when I was notified that he was going to become the chairman of the MAC, I was very pleased. He's been a fantastic commissioner, a very supportive board chairman, and also a very, very good friend, and someone that I can depend on and could always go to with good news and or bad news. So thank you, Dan, for those very kind remarks, and thank you for your fine support for all of the years. That's another story. I also like to thank Dale Kirchner and the TC Business, Twin Cities Business Magazine folks. This is a great event, a wonderful event, and I have to be very honest. When I received the phone call from Dale that I had been selected as an inductee, I had to pause and ask him for a moment. You do realize that I'm a lifetime public employee. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And he said, we know that, but we've still decided we're going to ask you to join the organization, be one of our inductees for 2017. And I was quite surprised, but also quite frankly honored and humbled, because this is something that someone in my world would never have imagined could happen. So to Dale and his entire team, thank you very much. I also want to shout out I'll shout out also to MSP Communications leader Vance Opperman. I have been reading Twin Cities Business Magazine, I think, since its inception. And the first thing I do when I open the magazine, I go to the very back page, the last page, and it's Van Opperman's article, always his open letter program or column. And I find that to be interesting because I don't know what he's going to say or what he's going to do, but the logic and the thoughts and what he has contributed to our community overall and what he does to communicate with other folks, I think is important. And so to Vance, I want to shout out and say thank you very much for the work that you do. And also to my fellow inductees this evening. I've had a chance to meet a few of them this evening. Incredible performers, people who have contributed to the economy and the goodwill of the state of Minnesota and our community as a whole. I am quite frankly honored to be included in this class of 2017. You saw enough of what I thought I might talk about tonight on the video, but let me just recap a little bit here. 1977, my wife Joan and I, and by the way, my family's here. My wife Joan of 47 years, my son David is here, his wife Marilyn is not with us this evening, she could not join us. My daughter Julie and her husband Joe Zernhelt, and my son Matthew and his wife Shana are here. Important folks to me, obviously, and all the support that a person needs to do what I've been able to do for all of these years. Also, my staff, the former staff of commissioners and leadership of the Metropolitan Airports Commission is here. Thank you to all of you for coming tonight. But more importantly, thank you for all the support and all the things that you did to keep us on track to contribute to the success of the organization. And also, thank you. And also, colleagues of mine from Hamlin University. I was a student there. That's where I got my doctorate. But it's also a place I served on the board of trustees at Hamlin University. And thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. It really means a great deal to me. 1977 was a decision year when Joan and I decided to leave active duty in the military after 7 years. 7 years is at a point where you get to make decisions. Do you stay in the military for another 15 or 20 years and have a career and retire, or do you leave and pursue other interests? And we decided to leave the military, not because I didn't like it, but because I wanted to seek other opportunities. It was a time of decision-making for us, and we decided to join the staff at the Metropolitan Airports Commission. One of the most important lessons I guess I would like to share with you that I've learned, and that is that people who you meet that you don't know walking in the door can have a profound impact on your future. You don't probably know any of these names, maybe Raymond Glumack because of Glumack Drive at the airport, but Ray Glumack, Claude Schmidt, Bill Olson, Warren Peterson, Scott G. Matheson were all of the greatest generation. They were all 55 to 60 years old in 1977 when I joined the commission. I walked in the door as a 30-year-old kid who was a new manager in the organization. And that group of very senior experienced people took me under their wing. They mentored me, they taught me, they gave me wisdom, taught me things that were important to know about the job and about aviation. They basically were the people who had contributed most significantly to my ultimate success and my tenure at the Metropolitan Airports Commission. Those greatest generation mentors of mine, I'm eternally indebted. The Airports Commission is an unusual organization in that we get involved in an awful lot of stuff. And I'm sure in business it's the same way, but in government it seems to be maybe a bit more complicated and a little more convoluted because decisions are tougher to make. No one party can make a decision. But there have been dramatic things that have happened in the industry since 1977, starting with the Deregulation Act of 1978, where the airline industry was turned upside down on its ear. It was a time when government decided to get out of telling airline companies where they could fly, what time they flew, what kind of an airplane that they were going to use, and what the cost of an airline ticket was. And they essentially said in the Deregulation Act, you're on your own, go out and compete. If you survive, great. If you don't, competitors will provide the service. So that Deregulation Act, basically, we saw the entrance of companies like, remember People's Express? We saw companies like TWA, Pan Am, Western, Eastern disappear. Southwest Airlines grew dramatically during those times. Those low-cost carriers basically undercut the profitability of the scheduled legacy carriers and changed the industry forever. In our world, it was the creation of the hub airport system of large airports in the country. And Minneapolis being the home of both North Central Airlines, which became Republic, and Northwest Airlines, we had two national international carriers in the Twin Cities, and as a result ended up being the hub of the ultimate Northwest Airlines headquarters. That act has changed our industry forever, and I think for the better overall because cost of transportation now is significantly less. Mention some of the things that have happened over the years. Let me just go very quickly through a few. The merger of Northwest Airlines and Republic in 1986, a lot of negotiation, a lot of angst, one large carrier instead of two competitors. The leveraged buyout of Northwest Airlines by Al Checkey and Gary Wilson. The passage of the the Airport Planning Act in 1989 at the Minnesota Legislature, which basically directed us to take a look at building a new airport on a greenfield site versus taking a look at expanding the airport at its current location. The $315 million loan to Northwest Airlines was unheard of in the day and has never been done since, where we loaned the airline company money to expand and grow and be more competitive because we believed that air service and jobs in Minnesota were essential, and we had to have international aviation connectivity to all the national markets and to the world. And I was firm in that position, and quite frankly, as I said earlier, that worked out very, very well. The legislature voted in 1996 to allow the commission to spend $3.5 billion to expand the airport. New runways, expanded terminals, the light rail transit underneath the facility, significant changes all the way through the years. And of course, in 9/11, September 11th of 2001, the terrorist event in New York basically turned our industry upside down. For 4 days, not an airplane flew across this country. Every airplane that was in the sky was on the ground at an airport somewhere within 90 minutes of that event. And for the next 4 or 5 days, nobody knew what was going to happen with the industry or what we were going to do in this country to get it back and moving again. 2005 was the Northwest Airlines bankruptcy. 2008 is when Delta acquired Northwest Airlines and moved our world headquarter airline to Atlanta, Georgia. Delta Airlines then, following that in 2011, paid off that loan of the remaining $1.5 billion or $2 billion. And today, the airport's starting its next $2.5 billion expansion plan. One of the reasons I decided to retire it when I did, short of 40 years, was because I believed it was important for me to step aside so the new executive director, CEO, could in fact be part of and on the ground floor of the next $2.5 billion expansion program. Minneapolis-St. Paul is an interesting airport. You've seen the statistics, so I will not bother to go through them. But the bottom line is that the Airports Commission is a self-supporting public agency that does not receive any public dollars assistance. I testify at the legislature every year for 40 years, almost 40 years, and never asked for appropriations or funding. We charge our customers fees to use our facilities. We charge you, the traveling public, to pay to park in our parking ramps, and when you buy something in our terminal building, we get a percentage of the gross sale. We charge the airlines to land on our runways and to occupy our hangars, and with that, we can generate about $350 million. And the one thing I do take great pride in is that the Airports Commission runs much more like a business than most government, in that what we do is take a look at our revenues generated and forecast, take a look at how much money and what we have in our bank account, how much money it's going to take us to go ahead and do the things that we want to do over the forthcoming year, and make sure that budget stays on track. And what we've done for the last 40 years has been in the black continuously with a substantially healthy reserve without the taxpayers' assistance, and that's an important accomplishment. That does not happen by accident. Our success is a result of the contribution of outstanding people. During my tenure at the Airports Commission, I've worked for 6 governors, I've worked for 9 chairmen, and more than 125 commissioners. The governor appoints most of the board members to the MAC for 4-year terms. And we've been blessed and fortunate that during the years that I was executive director and CEO, governors took this appointment very seriously. Outstanding people who cared and didn't know a thing about the business but learned a great deal and immersed themselves. Good advice, good decision-making, great support, doing the right thing with a board that was cooperative and collaborative and challenging at times, which is also critically important. The other thing that I want to mention to you is the staff. People like me, and I think other leaders would feel the same way, are totally and completely dependent upon the quality of the work of people who do the day in and day out task, the workers in the organization. From the snowplow driver or the heavy equipment operator or the mechanic or the plumber or the electrician, the accountant, the lawyer, no matter who that person is, they have their individual contribution that's essential to the organization. My success at the MAC is because those people were dedicated, passionate, hardworking folks who took great pride in their work. Minneapolis-St. Paul International is recognized around the country and around the world as one of the best managed airports in the country because of those people doing their work. I'm honored this evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you. Thank you very much for this distinction.